Hello and welcome to Deep Blue Sea, the podcast. I am Mark, piece of chess on a chessboard, Hoffmeyer.
And I am Jay, red flag, Cluet. And this is Deep Blue Sea 2, Chapter 10. It's the final chapter of Deep Blue Sea 2. We made it. This was going to be like one episode, and we've managed 10 so far.
I loved it. I've loved this series. This has been a blast.
But yeah, I have deeply enjoyed it as well, far more than I thought I would. But we need
to make you blue.
Finishing this makes me blue. But then I look ahead, and just over the horizon, what's that? It's Deep Blue Sea 3. So that makes me all happy again. But we need to finish off Deep Blue Sea 2 first. We need to talk about Chapter 10. What happens in Chapter 10? Well, not a great deal. Let's be honest. It's less than 4 minutes, and most of that's credits, and none of it features any character we've met before. So, a little brief description of what happens in Deep Blue Sea 2, Chapter 10. After Dr. Mr. Calhoun, Trent Slater, and Aaron Ellery escape from Achilles and successfully blow it up, we cut to a sunset on a beach 3 weeks later. There are surfers and bodyboarders playing in the waves. A guy and girl are lounging on the sand. He says, "Come on, let's go," to her, and she replies she doesn't want to go out too deep. As they head to the water with their paddleboard, she asks, "What if there are sharks out there?" And he promises her, "There are no sharks on this beach." Meanwhile, a lifeguard removes a green beach flag and replaces it with a red one, signalling that Metallica should start playing the drums really loudly. As the guy pushes the girl out on the board, the camera descends underwater to see a full-size bull shark swimming towards the camera, surrounded by pups. The adult shark swims, mouth agape, into the camera. A woman screams, and we cut to black. And that's like 47 seconds in its credits. So there's not a lot to talk about this week, but we have a guest who we couldn't wait to have him back. He would have come back for Deep Blue Sea 3, but we couldn't wait that long. He joined us for an early chapter on Deep Blue Sea 2 when he'd only seen that chapter, so we figured perfect opportunity to have him back. Now he's seen the entire film and get his viewpoint on the 8 chapters between his first one and this one, and those two as well. From Fresh Show Sunday, it's Nick Rehack. Nick, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me again, fellas.
Anytime. I got to tell you, you're the host of the Paul Giamatti Power Hour, a new podcast that came out, and your episode the other day about Jello Folly, the wonderful 2007 Paul Giamatti film, loved it.
I appreciate that, man. A lot of work went into it. It's one of those films where you don't realize he's in it, and then once you do, like, it clicks. Like, you ever see Smokin' Aces?
Yeah.
Right? And you got that one guy, real Looney Tune, right? He's got the whole speech he gives to, I don't want to say whose character because it might give some stuff away, but you're like, oh, okay, that's just some random guy they found. Oh, no, that's Chris Pine. And you're like, I'm sorry, the same Chris Pine? And you're like, yeah, the same Chris Pine. It's the same thing with Jello Folly. You're like, well, that can't be. And you're like, yeah, it's Paul Giamatti. And you're like, what? What is he, the next Gary Oldman?
He was everywhere in the 90s. Remember that? Saving Private Ryan, My Best Friend's Wedding, Private Parts, Truman Show.
My Not-So-Best Friend's Wedding.
Wait, is that the sequel?
Oh, yeah, dude.
That's the prequel.
Wait, what, you're going to your not-friend's wedding?
Yeah.
Is that how?
My Not-So-Best Friends. Because there's a guilt. It's a very depressing, guilt-ridden sequel. Very bleak. I will say that, very bleak, because there's this intense guilt of like, look, I don't know this person as much, but I feel like I should be there for him.
You just met the person on a treadmill the other week at the gym.
Yeah, you're on the elliptical, they're on the treadmill.
Eyes lock.
They lock in a half. You know what I mean? I mean, you almost break your neck from how hard they lock.
Mm. It's like, don't sit like that, it'll stay, or don't make faces like that. Their neck was turned for so long, their neck stayed there.
Exactly. And then they both go to a chiropractor. It's the same chiropractor.
Played by Ray Liotta.
Yeah. Who happens to be the guy that's getting married to the not-so-best friend.
Ray Liotta?
Very forward-thinking.
Sigourney Weaver's in this, right? Is this a sequel to Heartbreakers?
I was thinking the same thing.
Here's the thing. It's kind of a wink and a nod thing. Like it's a grocery store moment. And you're like, wait a minute, is that? And then you realize it's the same universe.
They're bringing Gene Hackman out of retirement for a cameo.
Oh, that would be amazing. Jason Lee, Love Hewitt. Oh, that was a great cast. That's an underappreciated picture.
It is an incredible cast, yes.
Good movie.
Yeah, I like it.
Great
And Jello Folly, or my not so best friend's wedding, that's a wonderful slept on sequel.
It absolutely is. I mean, sometimes it's one of those like marathon runs on TBS from like 11:30 at night until 4 in the morning. That's actually why Conan O'Brien, his show is wrapping up. They need to make more time for Jello Folly, as well as Not So Best Friend's Wedding. It's going to be it's a Giamatti-thon.
So I do like our strategy this week of out of the gate talking about callbacks to a 20-minute pre-recording conversation that the listeners will never hear.
I don't know what
like
you're
it.
talking about.
Yeah,
You're
I know.
talking about the Power Hour.
So that
Jello
started with
Folly.
talking about skinning Dalmatians and ended up at the Paul Giamatti
Jay,
Power Hour Jello
my
Folly.
Look,
Can I was watching the credits this week for Deep Blue Sea 2, obviously. No, for Jello Folly. And I looked into the person who did stunts for Savra, Danielle Savra, and her name is Malin Kurjonen, and she's an Australian who was a pro boxer. She actually fought for titles. She's fought some of the biggest names in boxing. I think in Australia she had a title at one point. Then she moved to Cape Town. Now she just surfs and skydives, and she was Mila Jovovich's stunt double on Monster Hunter.
Oh,
And
nice.
I think, and she was Danielle's stunt double for this. I think, though, if you are a stunt person and you double for Mila Jovovich, who does almost all of her stunts, you got to be pretty intense to be Mila Jovovich's stunt double, because you know the stuff you're doing is going to be bonkers. So I thought that was pretty cool that one of the stunt women on this film, she also did stunts in Monster Hunter, which I love. And then for Mila Jovovich, there's some, okay, I was looking through this whole film. And so Lisa Marie Bothma, the special effects coordinator in this film, she also did Deep Blue Sea 3. She did Tomb Raider. She was the special effects coordinator on Tomb Raider. She did The Dark Tower. She did Lost Boys of Thirst. She worked on Mad Max Fury Road. She worked on Chronicle. She has been doing Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior, a prequel of a prequel of a prequel, Starship Troopers 3. I mean, this Doomsday, so she's been fabricating. Now she actually got to be the head coordinator on this. She was on Dread, the fabrication floor manager. This movie, Deep Blue Sea 2, is a little bit mind-boggling because when I started looking through everybody who worked on this, like Black Ginger, the VFX, Darren Hoffmeyer for the win, this movie has an incredible, very talented and like well-traveled crew. And it's just, but that's what makes it more interesting. I'm not going to hate on this movie because I love it, but that's what makes it more interesting to watch because this had a stacked cast, a stacked crew behind the camera. I just wanted to get that out there. I had a good time looking through.
You mentioned the special effects person working on Tomb Raider as well. There's a lot of crossover between this and Tomb Raider, even amongst the cast, because you got Timur Bergerac is one of the shark villains at the start. Kwame, he's a mercenary in Tomb Raider, and Jeremy Puado did stunts on Tomb Raider. So I don't know who. I haven't compared the full cast, but we've got at least those three crossing those two films. I wonder how many more there are.
It's just, I don't know. It's a stacked cast. Like the crew that worked on this movie. It just, which kind of bums me out because, listen, as much as I adore this movie, I think they definitely had some interesting challenges on this with the same set, the different lighting, which we determined was fun. But it was, I don't know, it was fun looking through and seeing how talented this crew are and what they're working on. Like, this movie had an embarrassment of riches, and I guess it's not the biggest film crew in Cape Town, but I'd work with this cast. I mean, we talked with John Pogue. This is almost the same crew who did Deep Blue Sea 3. And I think they look completely different. So I'm excited to talk about Deep Blue Sea 3, by the way. But just looking through the credits, there's a lot of well-worked people here. And it was kind of wowing me looking through and seeing all the work that these people have done.
Yeah.
What's impressive is, did they just happen to decide, like, hey, we're going to shoot here, and all these people just happen to be around? Or they picked the spot because they're like, hey, do you know who lives here? Oh, really? Wow, do you know? Hey, they live here too. And it just keeps building and building. And then they're like, well, we all got to do something together, right? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, Beatles cover album? They're like, Deep Blue Sea 2? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, like, they were just walking around, and then they got pulled into it. But I just loved seeing the embarrassment of riches on this crew. And I don't know if they were used to the best of their abilities, but I love this movie. And also, Nick, I want to say thank you so much for, on what you wrote on Twitter. You called out one of my favorite quotes of this film, where we're just pieces of chess on a chessboard. It's beautiful. It makes me. I love the lines in this movie.
I'm watching it, and I hear it, and I'm like, oh, it took me a couple seconds. I'm like, he didn't. So I go back, and I play through it again, and I'm like, I must have something in my ears. After a little Q-tip action, I listen through, and I'm like, no, he really says this line. Like, this is, and you can tell even he's unsure about it, and kind of wants to giggle, but they leave it in as if that's some kind of like, hey, we ad-lib on the set. No, should you though? Like, I don't know. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Because they're real Jurassic Parky here.
There's a lot of interesting lines in here with Joy Swim, and then you have Mike saying either "kiss my ass" or "suck my ass."
He said both. Yep,
Yeah.
both in there.
And then you have pieces of chess on a chessboard. And I've looked up the writers, Jessica Scott, and all the different writers. But Jessica Scott, I mean, she won a Writers Guild of America award for a children's script for long form or special for Another Cinderella Story in 2008. She was nominated in 2013, 2014 for standing writing on a children's series, which was R.L. Stein's The Haunting Hour. Then Hans Rodionov, he has written in South Africa, but he did The Skulls too. So, I mean, he's a South African writer. So I don't think that people wrote in the script pieces of chess on a chessboard, right? So that was just, we'll keep it. Does that make sense? Because I don't, sometimes you'll write a script and there might be something that's lost in translation. Some books have that issue, but this one doesn't have that. So I just was wondering about these joy swims and all these different lines. Like, were these people forgetting their lines and just belting stuff out and then just moving on?
It's got to be local stuff, right? Like, it's got to be South African. It's got to be Australian. Like, it's got to be something that they say, and maybe they were goofing around on set and said it, and then it happens to pop out. Like, if you work with a bunch of people and one person has this little, like, catchphrase or way they say something, you tend to pick up on it after a while. And you say it without even realizing it. Like, it's really subconscious. Like, at work, we had this guy, if you ask him to do something, he goes, oh, all right. He puts it together. Oh, all right. And now I'll catch myself every so often, like, hey, Nick, can you help me with this? Yeah, all right. And just throwing it in there. And this is probably one of those things where, you know what I mean, like craft services. You got, Thabo, Michael, and France. And they're just like, you know what? We're all just like chess pieces on a chessboard. And they're like, oh, man, that's, and it keeps going and going. The grips get in on it. Jason Dumi and Mawazi, like, all these people keep saying it, and then it got into the film.
I like it.
You could say the same thing for Ain't No Fun When the Rabbit's Got the Gun, Feeling Froggy Then Jump. These are all Slaterisms that I watched the film again today. I was trying to pick up on things we hadn't discussed earlier on. But yeah, Trent has a lot of little quips, a lot of little idiosyncratic lines that I kind of enjoyed.
And Eric Patterson and Jessica Scott, they got their start working on kid shows like Cinderella Story. They both got nominated, like the Zula Patrol. Then they moved actually R.L. Stein's A Haunting Hour. So these are two people who write Christmas movies, which is where they might have met Slater Trent, Trent Slater, Slant Trader. What's the other one?
Traitor Slant.
Traitor Slant. So maybe they met him there. And then they had him in here. But I think these two come from writing kids' movies and holiday films, and then they're writing Deep Blue Sea 2. So I wonder if they just made it very pleasant, like kids' shows and Christmas movies. That's the kind of dialogue. And then they try to beef it up a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, with the blood and the violence.
Yeah.
Which wasn't a whole lot. There was a couple moments where it's like, holy. But then everything else was like, oh, okay. It's just a lot of the water turning a different color all of a sudden.
Yeah, we talked last week how the survivors of the film didn't actually go through that much. They all managed to escape most of the events of the film.
I feel like the worst is they're just really pruning.
Yeah, they've just been in water for so long. Yeah.
They just start playing a saxophone like they're the raisins, the California raisins.
No.
Yeah, that is a deleted scene. So if you watch the deleted scenes, Mike is in the water.
No,
for about
not this again.
Yeah, Mike is in the water for about 17 minutes, just playing a saxophone, and then he goes to the generator, presses a button.